Hello and welcome back to Evolved Models with me, Chris. Something a bit different today. Anyone who's been watching the Tiger build has seen it coming along quite nicely. We're getting to a point now where we've got to paint the shells for the inside of the tank. Now we've got a couple of options that we can use to do this. We've got the Xtreme metal from AK, we've got the classic Alclads, and we've got these new true metal paints from AK. They are a lot like a wax paraffin based product, and they actually rub on and you can rub them off to a buff shine. What I want to do is do a bit of a review and a test and see how we get on with them. So all in the name of science, and to give each one of these the best chance of doing their best and seeing what they can do, I've created a piece of card, styrene here, which I've primed in black. Now you may be able to see the squares on the top here are slightly shinier. They've been glossed. This is just the standard primer. Now for the primers I've used, the bottom selection is the primer from AK, and the top one had the primer from AK, and then on top of that Alclad Gloss Black. So that's what we're working with here. I've broken it down into these 5 separate squares. So we've got copper, brass, iron, the Xtreme brass from AK, and then we've got the Alclad at the end. I wanted to see if it makes any difference with either the Xtreme metal, the Alclad, or even the true metal, if it's actually painted onto a gloss surface rather than a matte one. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to apply the Alclad and the Xtreme metal to this, and we'll see what they look like. So I'm just going to get the airbrush ready now. I'll be back in a second and we can spray up these and see what we got with the traditional Xtreme metal and Alclad. What I've done is I've loaded up some of the Alclad 2 gold into the airbrush, which we can see there. We know Alclad needs spraying at quite a low air pressure, and I've just masked off this as we don't get any overspray or contamination in our test. So I'm going to go ahead and spray this now. So a quick test on the side here, flows good. And this top one is the one that has been primed and then we've gone over with gloss. So as normal with Alclad, just build up the layers gently. Don't need to go too mad, don't need to lay down too much paint all at once. It's really thin stuff and it does cover quite well. I think the airbrush must be running probably between about 10 and 15 psi. I'm just building it up. Obviously these aren't acrylic based paints, the Alclad, so they can tend to smell a bit, so thank God we're only doing a small area. I'm just going to empty the airbrush so we've got no paint left in there. And I think we've got a good coverage on top. And we're running out of paint slowly. And there we go, there she glows. Right, I'm just going to clean the airbrush up now and we're back with you in a second and we will do the Xtreme brass. Next up we've got the Xtreme metal from AK. I've given it a good shake using the same airbrush. I've just cleaned it all out so we've got no contamination. Again, this stuff normally needs to be sprayed at quite a low air pressure, I found. So I've not much in here in the colour cup and we're going to follow the same process. So this top one is one that's covered in gloss as well as the primer, and the bottom one is primer only. Stuff smells quite bad as well. It's obviously not acrylic based. We need thinners probably to clean it up. It's going down nicely with good coverage. Again, just like the Alclad, just building up the layer gently. Don't need to flood it over, it's really, really thin. And it does dry quite quickly, to be honest. Excuse me. And there we go, we're out of paint. So I'm going to leave that to dry for a second. We'll come back in a minute and we'll do the true metal paints. So I've left it sort of 10 minutes or so for the Xtreme brass and the Alclad to dry. Just need to remove the masking tape I put on there and see what we've got. So these are obviously traditional paints that we've been using over the years. Well, I have anyway, for doing metal work. And we can just have a look in here to start with. So again, just to remind you that the top one was glossed and the bottom one was just a primer, and essentially they're looking much the same. I'm just looking at the camera here to see if you can pick it up. There is a slight difference with the Xtreme brass and the Alclad, to be honest, where this looks a bit flat and it is a little more shiny here, but essentially these won't rub anymore, and that's as shiny as they're going to be. So that's what we're stuck with. So let's now have a look at the true metal paints from AK and see what we can do with those. I must admit, before I made this video I did have a play off camera with them to make sure I wasn't being a complete muppet, and I had a little bit of success and a little bit of disappointment with them. To be honest, I'll show you at the end, but initially I painted them on with paintbrush, and I don't think that was the best idea. I didn't get the best finish with the paintbrush, and reading the instructions it says start to spread over the desired area. In this case they're using their fingertips, but you can use a cotton swab as well or napkin. On the top I'm going to use a napkin or cotton swab to do it. On the bottom I'm going to use the old fingers and see what happens there. As I don't want to make a mess all over this nice black thing here, I'm just going to put this down, and I'm going to start off with the true metal iron here. So I've got a clean cotton swab, so we'll do the top one first. So it comes in obviously a tube, and it's very much like a melted wax sort of consistency. It does paint quite nicely, though it does leave a lot of brush marks, and a little bit of this stuff goes a long way, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. So essentially I've just got a little bit on the brush there. Let's zoom you in a bit, and obviously we're going to do the iron here, and I'm just going to go over this square with it a little bit more. There we go. Just going to go over the iron here with the cotton swab and rub it in. And you see it's almost like a gel. It's obviously it is some sort of paint, but it doesn't have the consistency of normal paint. It's almost like it's drying and it's going hard. But there's the first one I've done with a cotton swab, and that's on there. See, it's quite thick. A piece of paper to put the swab on, and the next piece I'm going to use my finger, so I'm going to get rather messy here. So just a little bit on the end of my finger, and again I'm just going to rub it over here, and it smells of like paraffin wax. If you've ever been camping, used a camping stove, it smells a lot like that. Good coverage, and I only had a little bit on my finger, and that's covered quite nicely. So what I'm going to do is now is I'm going to do the exact same process for the brass and the copper. So I'm going to get two more swabs out, reach behind me, and we're going to do the same process for the brass. So let's take a bit of the brass, and with the swab, same process exactly. Probably got a bit too much on here, but you can see how thin it is. It just sucks itself into all the areas. It's great coverage. And we should be able to buff this off afterwards as well. So that's going to be interesting to see what sort of shine we can get, because I want to use this for the shells on the Tiger. There's a number of shells that are in brass, obviously the brass casings, and I really like to be able to polish them up. So that was with the swab, and now we're going to use the finger. Make sure you're on camera, there we go. Again, this one seems thinner than the iron, spreads a lot easier. And it's still really sort of wet. And last but not least, we have the copper. Just put the tops back on. And we have the copper here. Again, clean swab. A little bit on there. And here we go. This stuff, the copper seems really thin. It's not covering as well as the other stuff. And I'm hoping that all of these need just sort of one coat. We don't need to start putting layers and layers of coats on to get the coverage and the shininess that we want. So that's the copper there. And last but not least, let's do it with the finger. I know where to hold now. And here he is. And there on there. Now, on the instruction sheet that came with it, that tells us how to apply it, there wasn't any sort of drying time on there. So I'm going to give it sort of 5 minutes or so. I'm not going to give it too long at all, but I'm going to give it 5 minutes, and then I'm going to come back to these and I'm going to give them a polish off and see what happens. So my fingers are now absolutely caked with this stuff, and I'm going to go wash those off, and we'll come back in about 5 minutes and we'll see what we've got. Welcome back. Well, the 5 minutes is up now, so I'm going to give this a go at rubbing it down. First of all, I'm going to use this just normal kitchen paper towel, and we'll see how this goes. It does seem like it's still a bit wet, but apparently we should be okay. So I'm just going to start gently. I'm just going to go over it. As you can see here, I've masked them off just so I don't bleed into the other areas. I'm not pressing down too hard at all. It's basically just rubbing it over the top. I don't want to remove it, we need to polish it. So, it's not all coming off, but we've got some on the bottom of the cloth here. And I think it's going to be one of these cases that the more you polish it, the better it's going to look. So obviously this top one here is the one that was glossed, and I can see a bit of a shine coming through now. So I'm not pressing too hard at all. I can still see some like brush strokes from the actual swab that we used to put it on, and it's a lot better actually now I'm doing a swirling motion. It's really starting to shine up now. So that's that one there. Let's do the same process for the one just had just primer on. This was one I laid down with my finger as well. And the shine's just starting to come through now. Again, not too hard, just going in circles now. And we've got a bit coming off on the cloth there, so I'm just going to spin it around. Seems to be taking some of the high spots off, a bit like polishing really. Any peaks that are on top seem to be flattening down a little bit. They're still visible. It's coming up nicely there. What I'm going to do is, it's like a lens cleaning cloth for camera lenses. I've got loads of these because obviously I enjoy my photography, and it's quite soft. I just wonder if this is going to make any difference at all really. So let's go over both of these at the same time. Kill two birds with one stone, eh? And here we've got the shine's coming up alright now. So we can just see there, we can see the shine. It's nice. We can still see some brush marks in there. Not sure why they've not flattened down, but let's move quickly on to the brass now. I'm just going to put the protective tape back over. Ooh. There we go. And again, I'm going to use the same process of using the kitchen towel. Not too hard. And circles. Bit of a shine coming onto these now. We can still see the swirl marks and finger marks on both of them. But we can see there's a bit of a shine coming to the brass as well. And we're just going to go with that fine cloth. And it really is starting to shine up a bit now, this brass. And we can see it's a bit of a shine. And let's quickly move on to the last piece. And I'm not sure we're going to need these protector things here actually. It looks like it's pretty much dried. And again, let's move into view of the camera. There we go. The coverage of this copper wasn't as good as the other two. But it's not all coming off on the towel, so it must be sticking to something. And again, fine cloth. And that's essentially one coat of the true metal. So let's have a look at these then. So that's what I'm getting thus far. Obviously we've got the Alclads at the end here, normal traditional stuff I've been using. We've got the Xtreme brass, pretty much like an Alclad to be honest. Not much difference between the matte at the bottom and the gloss at the top. These a good shine coming through on them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put another coat on. I think I'm going to get my finger and put another coat on each one of these, and then we'll have another look and see if that makes any difference at all. So let me do that and we're back in a second and we'll see if it's made any difference at all. I've just applied a second coat to all of these now, and I've left it for sort of a minute or two. I've not gone mad at all, not 5-10 minutes. I want to see if this makes any difference. So again, I'm going with the normal kitchen cloth, and it is still slightly wet, but I'm hoping that it might flatten out some of the peaks and troughs in the paint. And I can feel the resistance as it's sort of drying underneath the towel, and it's looking a bit more even. There's a lot more resistance because obviously it's the paint's still not completely cured. Not pressing too hard still. I think I've just removed the peaks on there. Again, there's not too much coming off on here, so it must be sticking down. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with the other cloth and try and buff it off. Oh, some of the brass on there. It's looking a lot smoother when removing it quicker and not letting it completely set. That is looking better. Excellent. What I'm going to do is, was a good idea using the tape. There we go. I'm going to do exactly the same process now for the brass. Different, well, cleaner side. And that's looking much better as well. All the peaks and troughs are slowly disappearing off this now. Again, not pressing too hard at all. Basically, it's just the weight of my hand on top of the cloth. There we go. And let's use the fine cloth again. Ooh. Clean side, and let's go over it. And it's really starting to pop now. Much better. Okay, and let's jump onto the copper. Again, clean side. I'm just going to spin it around on camera. And once again, peaks and troughs have disappeared, really getting a burnished copper look coming through there, even worn copper. Maybe I'm removing a bit too much at the moment, but the peaks and troughs have disappeared off there now. A nice effect. It's almost like worn copper. And again, the really fine cloth going over it. That's looking far better, isn't it? Far better. One thing I did notice, I don't know if you can see up here, this little blemish. It was just some cleaner, airbrush cleaner that spilt on there. It looks like this stuff picks up any marks on the undersurface. So it's going to be a case of priming, making sure your surfaces are all absolutely perfect before putting this stuff on, else you're going to get marks like this. What I'm going to do is just tidy this up a bit now, and I'm thinking about putting another third layer on, see if we can make this absolutely wicked. So leave it with me a second and we'll be back in a moment and we'll see what we've got. So this time the iron is, I've basically just finished putting it down. It is still completely wet. I want to see if we can make it any better. So another clean end of paper towel. So it's been on for about 30 seconds to a minute. I'm just going to go over it gently and see if we can make this look absolutely wicked. I can still feel that it's sort of not set up on here and it's moving around underneath. And it's probably rehydrating the true metal that's underneath as well, and again getting rid of those peaks and troughs. And we'll put some circular motions in there as well. And I'm going to go on with the fine cloth now. Still a bit tacky. Let's have a clean side. That's the ticket. Again, not too much pressure on that. It's far smoother than it was, far smoother. I'm so happy with that. I'm going to go off camera now. I'm going to put another coat on the brass and the copper, and we'll have a look what we've got after 3 coats, but so far looking good. So as you've just seen, these have all had a 3rd coat of the true metal on there, and I've basically polished them up straight away. The results are, as you can see, I don't think with the true metal that a gloss coat underneath, which are these top ones, makes any difference at all. I think the rule of thumb is the paint needs something to bite into, so a good primer underneath seems to do the trick. We can see on here where it's not been primed and I've rubbed over it, it's come off. So essentially you need a good primed surface and plenty of elbow grease. The rule of thumb seems to be, such is life, is quicker on, quicker off. You don't need to let this stuff dry, you need to get it onto the piece straight away and then start rubbing it straight off. You may need more than 1 coat to get the desired finish. I bet if I leave this now and come back to it in a while and polish it some more, I can get these looking like a mirror finish. So overall it's looking really good. If we look down here, the normal Alclad compared to the shininess of the true metals along here, and the same with Xtreme brass, it's night and day. These are absolutely wicked, they cover really well. There's a bit of an art form to getting it laid down properly and getting it covering and getting it buffed up properly, but essentially it's looking like really good. I'm quite impressed with the results we've got there. As I said at the beginning of the video, I did have a play around with this yesterday and do a bit of filming, and this is a result that I came up with yesterday, and I didn't think it was very good at all. We can see sort of brush marks in here, the metal doesn't look nice, and it generally doesn't look very good at all. Now this has happened because I think I used a brush where it's better to use your finger to apply it, and the second thing was I left this for about 30 minutes to dry before going over it and buffing it off, and I think that's bad. As I said a minute ago, it's quicker to get the stuff on and off and get it moving around the piece while it's still in sort of a semi-liquid form, filling in all of the gaps and the peaks in there, and then we get a much better result for the true metal. Using a brush, I suppose if you use a brush to apply it but rub it off really quickly, you can alleviate the problem that I had here. But essentially it is a case of practice with this, and to be pretty quick while applying it to the model. The only negative thing I could say about it really is it's messy. As we can see on my paper here, it's quite a mess, so it is quite fiddly, but the results are quite good. Thanks for joining me for the review / test of the True Metal paints from AK. I hope you all have a lovely Christmas and a good New Year, and thanks for joining me. See you again soon.